Hello! This is a new style of video I'm planning to experiment with, but essentially this kind of more casual, not scripted style of video. And as you probably know by now, I'm very, very much into film. And I have the goal, because I'm a completionist, to rank and complete a bunch of different directors. And so, the first director that I have seen all of their filmography of is admittedly only 3 films, but still 3 pretty good films. There's not a single film in this filmography that I would give a bad rating to, but you saw the title of the video, it's Greta Gerwig. So, without further ado, let's rank Greta Gerwig's filmography. So a little bit of background. I had not seen any of Greta Gerwig's films until last year in the lead up to Barbie. I watched one of her ones that came out before, and then just a couple weeks ago I finally got around to watching the other film of hers, because I really got into film over the past year, 2 years or so. I'm late to the party on a lot of franchises, on a lot of directors, and I like what I see. She's well regarded, and I don't think it's controversial to say that she's one of the most promising directors of the past 10 years. And you'll see how my thoughts on all of them. But again, as I said before, there's not a single film in her filmography that I would give a full-out negative rating to. And without further ado, let's start the ranking. So coming in last place is very surprising to me as well, but I'm sure to you, Lady Bird. Now this is widely regarded as her best film, and I can certainly see that. This is a type of film that I absolutely can understand as being someone's favorite. As for the positives, it's a very well shot film, and it's very well acted. I forget the pronunciation of her name, but the lead actress scores, absolutely messing that up, but the lead actress who's in Lady Bird, in another one of Greta Gerwig's films, she is very good. She's able to capture a lot of the different emotions. The rest of the cast are also solid. You've also got Timothée Chalamet here in a role. 2017 was definitely his year. I think Call Me By Your Name was the bigger film that put him on the map, but this definitely didn't hurt. There's a lot of character work. It's a character-driven film. But I just didn't connect with this one. Whereas I think what Gerwig was able to do with her other films and take concepts and experiences that are unique and unanimous to a single group of people, but she's able to have an emotional attachment, an emotional core that makes them appeal and makes them relatable to people who are outside of that specific group of people. And I don't think she quite was able to do that in Lady Bird for me personally. So for all of the character drama, for all of the things Lady Bird goes through, I was always kind of arm's distance away. I couldn't fully get into the story. It's also a coming-of-age film. I've not seen many of them. I don't really like most of them. It's not a genre I particularly care for. This is one of the better ones I've seen, but it's got that working against it. Usually in coming-of-age films, I just find them to be quite meandering and have a lot of irritating characters. Like Boyhood, for instance, I thought was dreadful. Genuinely just terrible. But this is not a review of Boyhood. This is a review of Lady Bird. Lady Bird is not nearly on the level of some of the bad coming-of-age films, but it does have that against it. And for the kind of Lady Bird herself, she very much walks the line of between being flawed, but you can empathize with her, and going over the line and just being too flawed, unacceptable. And the main scene that comes to mind is the assembly scene. I agree with your stance on the topic that's being discussed. I don't agree with the teacher. I agree with what Lady Bird stance on the whole subject matter is, but the way she goes about expressing it, it's unacceptable. It's not okay. And that scene pissed me off quite a bit. But she does walk the line, but you do empathize with her. Whereas the mom, I thought the mom was just being difficult. I could not buy into the conflict between her and her mom. I just found the mom to be too difficult, that's the word, difficult. And I just did not feel, to me at least, like there was something there, something to really motivate and be the reason for that difficulty, for that just... I can't think of another word to describe it, but you get what I mean. I just could not buy into that conflict because of the mom. But as I said, this isn't a bad film at all. I still give it a 7 out of 10, as you can see. And I think that it is a controversial score just because this is such a highly regarded film. I can absolutely see this being someone's favorite film, especially if you... I don't mean to sound sexist, but if you are a woman, I think you will get more out of this than necessarily I did. It's a well-made film. It's just not a film I was able to connect with. In second place, we have Gerwig's newest film, Barbie. And you'll notice that little score dropped a bit from when I did the 2023 ranking, having it simmer in my mind a bit more. There's a couple more things... Well, not a couple more things I have wrong with the film. I didn't find anything new. It didn't feel quite right giving it a 9 at the time, and simmering on it more, I think an 8.5 works better. But this is still an incredibly funny film. You've got just immaculate sets and costumes. I didn't play with Barbies. I never had a Barbie. I don't even think I've even touched one. But I could absolutely tell just by the reaction in my theater when I went to see it that they were pulling specific references, specific toys, and they were translating that into live action, into these sets, and I think that on its own is great. As I mentioned before, it's extremely funny. There's just so many jokes that had me laughing. I had the goofiest, biggest grin on my face from about the first 2 minutes when you've got that 2001 parody. It's just an immensely funny film. It's smart, it's witty, and I was just laughing for the whole way through. And you've got, again, but great central performances from Margot Robbie, from Ryan Gosling. This is my favorite Ryan Gosling role. I've seen a number of his films. He's not one of my favorites, I have to be honest, but I like silly Ryan Gosling, and this is probably silliest Ryan Gosling. And then Margot Robbie as well, she is able to capture kind of that goofy tone that they're going for, but also she does have some good emotional scenes. She is the one that has the kind of driving factor for the emotion, as well as America Ferrera and her daughter, but I think it is mostly Margot Robbie. And I think as well, this film is a great on-ramp, a great starting film for people to get more into cinema, outside of just your big blockbusters like Marvel movies or Fast and the Furious or Star Wars, to get more into kind of deeper cinema that has a purpose, that has something to say. Now, a little mixed thing, and I think what prevents this from being number one, is not a bad thing, it's an obvious choice, but it splits the focus between comedy and character development, which works for this film, but I do think it means it's not as rich or as much to kind of analyze or pick apart or really invest in than some of her other work. I would even argue Lady Bird does a lot more with the character and character dynamics than perhaps Barbie does, because Barbie is splitting its focus between being extraordinarily funny, which it succeeds at, and then, like, the character arcs feels almost secondary to a degree. And it's not badly done. I want to stress that. I don't think it's done poorly. It is just not nearly on the same level as her other films. And then a couple things I genuinely didn't like with this film. I think the climax it gets a bit too weird for me when you have the Kens going to war and all of them like playing Matchbox 20 on the beach. Like, it's funny, it's neat, it's an interesting way to explore this. I just think it gets a bit too weird, but the film does end on a very strong note. Not only is it a very funny joke, that's the last shot, but also the whole "What Was I Made For," I believe that's the name of the song, "What Was I Made For" sequence is very effective and emotional, and it ties the whole film together, and so that mostly makes up for the climax being as weird as it is. There was a couple jokes about infidelity that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know if the film was necessarily endorsing the act. I could be wrong, maybe I'm just misinterpreting it, but it kind of seemed like there's just two small blink and you'll miss it lines, just kind of like, no, I don't agree with that. And then, this is the most controversial thing of probably the whole video. I said this in the 2023 ranking, but I don't like the I'm Just Ken song. I haven't expressed on this channel my opinion on La La Land, but put it briefly, I don't like when Ryan Gosling sings. And this was a second example of that. I did not care for the I'm Just Ken song. Was not for me. It'll probably get me in hot water, but remember, just it's opinions, it's art, it's subjective. But yeah, but beyond that, still, this is an extraordinarily funny film, and I'm very glad this was as successful as it is for kind of how quirky and offbeat and unusual of the type of film it was. Like, this is not a $1.5 billion film if you would just kind of lay out the plot synopsis, and so I'm very glad this film did as well as it did. Greta Gerwig is almost certainly going to be in high demand, and whatever she makes next, she will certainly get whatever budget she wants. But yeah, still, even though I've lowered my score a little bit, Barbie is still an extremely solid, well-made film, and I definitely think it's worth checking out if you somehow haven't seen it yet. But coming in easily by a landslide, Little Women 2019. If I drew up a ranking of my top 50 films of all time, I think this would make it. This was just such an engaging, such a gripping, character-based film. I love pretty much every aspect of this film. I mean, I am a sucker for westerns, and that whole time period, even if it isn't set in the Wild West, like Gangs of New York. One of my favorite Scorsese films, that's quite unpopular opinion, but I just absolutely love that kind of mid-1800s America aesthetic. And obviously this film has that in droves, and so you're gonna get my attention with that. Excellent performances all across the board, mostly, and by just an incredible cast of actresses. You've got some legacy ones with Laura Dern, Meryl Streep, proven legends, and then you've got these up-and-comers who are quickly proving themselves to be excellent, to be mainstays in Hollywood, with, again, Miss Ronan from Lady Bird, whose first name I don't know how to pronounce, I'm very sorry, but also Florence Pugh, who's just exploded in popularity over the past 5 years. And it is just such a gripping story. It's such a gripping character-based film. These characters, they feel like real people, they change, they mature with time, and they just feel authentic. They feel like real people. They make mistakes. Excuse me. They slip up, they stumble, but they never stop striving for what they want. And what they want does change over time. And it's just such a great story. It's with great characters. We fully invested all the way through, from the first scene right up to the very end. Just fantastic. Now, and to the point where if I, 10 years time have 10-15 years time have a little girl, I think this is absolutely a film, or even a little boy, this is absolutely a film I would show them. It's just so well made. The characters are so interesting, so engaging. It's just great. Now, the only two things I could kind of call criticisms I could levy at this film, I hinted at it earlier, but Emma Watson, she's not terrible here, but she is still being outperformed and lapped by everyone else in this film, and it's a bit distracting. I don't think Emma Watson is a particularly good actress. I think she's good in Harry Potter. Everything else I've seen her in, she's almost always been the weakest part. And I don't know whether that's a choice, whether that's a genuine, issue, but that has just been something I've noticed. And then the other thing, there's a moment in this film where essentially the main character, Joe March, kind of goes on a bit of a rant, and it basically is just kind of telling directly to the audience the message of the film. And I just found that a bit jarring, because for the entire rest of the runtime, the film is able to weave its themes, weave its messages into the narrative in a way that feels natural. You're not going to miss it. You won't miss these. You're not going to miss the message. You're not going to miss the themes. But they still feel natural and part of the story. So this one moment where basically we stop everything and the character basically just looks into the camera for about 40 seconds and just explains the message of the film. It's not exactly like that, but that's what it feels like. It just feels a little jarring, and I don't know if that scene perhaps should have been cut, maybe should have been reworked. It felt a little odd because of how well the film was able to just intertwine the themes, the message into the story, into the character dynamics in a way that felt like realistic and a part of the world. But still, this is an excellent film, a phenomenal film, I would even go as far to say. I cannot recommend this one enough. It is excellent. It is, again, it would probably make my favorites of all time if I drew up that list. It is just so good. So good. And one thing I'll say before because my laptop's about to die, before I finish this up, it's able to take experiences that you think would be specific to a single group of people, but because you have an emotional attachment to these characters, even if the experiences don't personally relate to you, they're still invested. And I think that's excellent. Truly an excellent piece of filmmaking. I cannot recommend it enough. So that was it for the Greta Gerwig ranking. Now, at the end of these director rankings, we're going to rank these directors on a list. Obviously, since Greta Gerwig is the first one, she is in first place, so she's simultaneously first place, middle of the pack, and last place all at once. But that's just the way it is with the first in a series. Now, I do plan to try and do as many directors as I can. I'm very close with some of them. Christopher Nolan, I have only 2 films of his left to watch. James Gunn, I only have 1, but I'm waiting for Superman Legacy next year, so it's really more like 2. I'm somewhat close with David Fincher. It's decently close with Tarantino, but again, I want to wait for his final film, whatever that ends up being. But look, try and let me know if you like this kind of more casual, non-scripted style of video. Also plan to do rankings of franchises, so say like Ghostbusters, Star Wars, God help me. Maybe, if I'm so brave, an MCU ranking with... I've not seen some of the more recent offerings, and that's not something I really want to do, but and maybe for the content. But thank you for watching. I will see you all later.